All right. Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar, 5 Tips for Disability Hiring, presented by Disability Solutions. A few items before we begin. In order to reduce background noise, all participants are on mute. As I noted in the chat bar, there is captioning available. All you got to do is hit the menu bar, and I believe it's closed captioning, show subtitles, and those will appear on the bottom of your screen. We'll also have a bit of a time for a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Again, all you got to do is click on the Q&A, type in your question at any point, and we will address it either throughout the presentation or at the end. With all that said, let's get started. So my name is Kevin McCluskey. I'm on your left. I am the Director of Partnership Development with Disability Solutions, and on your right is Keith Meadows. He is the Hiring and Engagement Consultant. And the joke I like to make is, even though we have different titles, we pretty much do the same thing. And that is, we help our employer clients' efforts in attracting and hiring talent with disabilities. And we do that by developing and managing federal, state, and local talent partners all across the country. We also work closely with employers to educate them on the benefits of hiring talent with disabilities. We also provide our employer clients with some tools to help them best engage and support potential and current employees. A little bit about us. If you look on your bottom right, and you'll see our logo, and you'll see that we are Disability Solutions at Ability Beyond. Ability Beyond is our parent company. It's a nonprofit based out of Connecticut, New York, and has provided services for individuals with disabilities for about 60 years. Disability Solutions is a consulting arm of Ability Beyond. It was created roughly about 8 years ago. It was created to help employers implement some successful initiatives to attract, hire, and retain talent with all types of disabilities. Our clients across the country include Pepsi, Centerpoint Energy, Synchrony, Bank of America, and many, many more. Our motto is changing minds and changing lives. We like to change the minds of employers through education, such as this webinar today, some success we've seen with our other clients, and some proven methods that have worked. And that then results in the changing of lives of job seekers with disabilities who turn into successful employees working for our clients. Part of our solutions is our Disability Solutions Career Center. It connects employers with wonderful talent with disabilities all across the country and into the US. Our website is jobs.disabilitytalent.org, and you can see many of our clients who are represented on our Career Center. All right, so why are we here? We plan to go through some foundational knowledge for you at the beginning here, and then we're going to walk you through our 5 tips to really help you when it comes to hiring people with disabilities which you can see on your screen right there. We'll then have a live Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We want to make sure you're comfortable asking any question you want. We're here to help, and some of this topics can be a little gray area or can be uncomfortable, but we want to make sure you are okay getting out there, answering or asking some of the questions, and we'll provide you with our thoughts and expertise on those subjects. So let's start by learning what is a disability. And for that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Keith Meadows. Keith?
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody, for joining. So before we get too deep into today's content, let's just take a step back and define the word disability, because that is obviously critical information if we're going to talk about disability hiring. So there's actually a lot of confusion about that word, and the actual definition is very broad. If you're like a lot of people, you may think of those with physical disabilities at first, or maybe you think of that symbol of disability that's out there everywhere, right? The wheelchair. But we're going to walk you through two examples here that will show you how nuanced that word can actually be. First, we have the definition from the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, which defines a disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And the key phrase here is we want you to keep in mind is physical or mental. All right, disability from another angle here, shows that the term disability includes, in addition to physical disabilities, also hidden disabilities, such as depression, PTSD, anxiety disorders, ADHD, and those are all hidden disabilities. And a lot of people are surprised when they find out that the condition that they have fits the definition of a disability. As we like to say, half of the battle is awareness. We've got a few individuals that you may or may not recognize here on your screen. And the first of which is Tom Cruise, who's actually overcame dyslexia, which is a learning disability. Next, we have Julia Louis-Dreyfus of Seinfeld and Veep fame, who is actually a cancer survivor. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, everybody recognizes that face, right? Actually has spoken openly about his battles with depression. And significantly less rich and famous, that's a photo of me from the JCPenney studio. We don't have much in common, this group of people right here, but what we do share is that we have hidden disabilities. I have severe asthma, which is a hidden disability. Dyslexia, ADD, depression, and being a cancer survivor are actually also hidden disabilities. Interesting statistic that we would like you to keep in mind throughout the presentation and after is that of all the disabilities out there, 70% are hidden or not readily noticeable. And we usually shock a lot of people when you see some of the conditions on your screen and think of them as being disabilities. A lot of people just simply view these as medical conditions, or they're just our journey in life. And we don't know that we fit the definition of a person with a disability, and who, by the way, we could also be checking that self-identification box for you as a business. Kevin?
All right. If you've seen our presentations before, we talk about different types of disabilities, and we also talk about person-first language. It's a little bit of a gray area these days, but we really want to focus on try to getting some of this vocabulary out of your mind, out of your everyday talk, and really starting saying other things like people with disabilities, or really keeping the disability off altogether. Again, a part of our mission is to educate employers as much as possible, and that includes and extends to those people around us, our friends, family members, so on and so forth. So we believe this is a piece of knowledge that you could take on right now. You can definitely make a difference in the world. As you'll hear throughout this presentation, Keith and I prefer to use person-first language. And I would say don't be worried if you still say some of these things. It does break take some time to break some of these old habits. So how do we address a person with a disability is a question we often hear when we start working with clients. So unfortunately, still today, we hear the disabled, the handicapped. I still hear the R word occasionally. Differently abled, special people, challenged people, crippled people. All these words have a bit of a negative label associated with them. When you say they're disabled car on the side of the highway, especially when it comes to employment. That means that it doesn't work. The car's not working, or it doesn't work properly. So calling a person disabled is kind of the same thing. That's why we choose putting the person first, or honestly keeping the disability off altogether. I call Keith Keith. I don't call Keith with a disability or Keith with asthma. I just call him my coworker Keith. And we certainly don't want individuals being defined only by their disability. And we have seen some employers really taking notice over the last couple of years, which is great. As you can see on the left-hand side, you can see Guide for Guests with Disabilities at Epcot. Has a beautiful ring to it. In 2000, I believe it was 2019, Major League Baseball went ahead and changed the old, disabled lists to the injured list. And they did this because there was a little bit of concern that the term disabled for injured players falsely compared disabilities with injuries, and also that inability to actually participate in sports. Again, a small educational piece to get employers and really people not only thinking differently, but also talking differently. Again, education and impact you can make today. Some other things we often hear are these typical myths and stigmas. Again, here in 2021, we still hear some awful things said about people with disabilities. And we also hear a lot of myths and stigmas out there that really just need to be squashed right away. Again, our main job here is to debunk these thoughts and concerns through the education and really success we are seeing with our employer clients. Here at Disability Solutions, when talking to potential employers that want to work with us, we hear that people with disabilities can't do our jobs, or we hear we don't hire people with disabilities. So think if you put any other diversity group into that. I don't hire women. Women couldn't do our jobs. For some reason, some people and employers and different hiring managers we're speaking with are comfortable saying this. We honestly hear it's true. And I can guarantee you, whatever open position you have right now, can find the right person with a disability to do each and every one of them. We've worked with companies hiring entry level warehouse workers all the way up to department managers. We've hired scientists with disabilities. We've hired engineers, technicians. We've hired almost all different types of jobs with the right person with a disability, right? We're looking at the talent, not just the disability. Stephen Hawking we have on this page, probably not your ideal candidate for maybe a delivery driver or a warehouse worker or even a salesperson, but he ended up being a really good fit for some other roles. I want you to know that not every person with a disability utilizes a wheelchair or has autism. Like Keith mentioned, there's many, many different kinds of disabilities out there that come from all walks of life, all skills and experiences, all across the board. Another myth we hear is people with mental health illnesses aren't dangerous, or are dangerous. I'm sorry, as it's reported in the news or seen in movies. It's just simply not true. These myths and stigmas that you see on your web page right here, these are awful stereotypes about people with disabilities, and we really want to challenge you today to kind of get this thinking out of your head and really spread the knowledge of what people with disabilities can do and can do for your company. Again, as employers, you definitely have the power to break some of these myths and stigmas. Now, we like to talk about the opportunity that comes with employing talent with disabilities. As of 2018, roughly 1 in every 4 of Americans have some type of disability, which makes them the largest talent group in the United States. Think about that for a second. Not only are people with disabilities the largest talent group out there, they are a typically untapped pool of talent. There's not a lot of employers going out there and recruiting people with disabilities for many, many different fears, along with those stigmas as well. The unemployment rate, definitely fluctuates from time to time. We took this stat in February 2020 before the world changed on us, but that unemployment rate does fluctuate, and we see one number really stay consistent, and that is the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is typically double that of the people without. And we like to call it a few factors that attribute to that. Again, some of those fear and stigmas that employers still have around hiring people with disabilities. We're also seeing that people with disabilities are pigeonholed into some entry level positions, part time positions, temporary positions. So they're not really getting that really competitive employment that they're seeking. There's also significant barriers to employment, such as transportation or access to medical equipment, or medical and anything to help them with their disability during the workday. And one silver lining we've seen with COVID is, looking at these numbers from February 2020 in March and into April, all of a sudden, a lot of us were working from home. And working from home, we also received a lot of accommodations. We got laptops at home, we got second screens, we got all these additional stuff that employers were telling us we couldn't give people with disabilities because that job couldn't be done from home. Amazingly, the world changed, and all of a sudden, a lot of us were working from home. So I see a silver lining with COVID is that people with disabilities who might need to be home to get their medical equipment, but are definitely qualified, definitely able to do that job, just have some barriers to getting to the actual workplace, they're going to see some opportunities grow, which I think is really great for us. And also looking at the talent, there is tons and tons of talent out there. I always like to say the talent ranges from high school students, maybe transitioning out of high school and not a good fit for college, where they can go into right to those entry level positions. They might have learning disabilities or something that's just not keeping them from going to a secondary school. Also, we have all the way up to baby boomers who are really aging into disabilities. A lot of baby boomers aging into disabilities, getting disabilities as they get older, who have years of experience. So think about that: the young 18-year-old ready to go to work, all the way up to people ready to retire. Tons and tons of skills, background, all that wonderful stuff that could bring to your employer. Then we got diversity within disabilities. You'll love this one if you're looking to increase your diversity across the board. Disabilities do not discriminate. As you can see, look at all the different diverse populations is included in disability. So you got, again, 1 in 4 Americans have some type of disability, 1 in 5 Caucasian, 1 in 4 Black, 1 in 6 Hispanic, 1 in 4 women, so on and so forth. So again, when you're going out there recruiting, hiring, promoting, training people with disabilities, you are also increasing your diversity all across the board, which is a wonderful thing. And lastly, I'll touch on the market value. Let's not forget about the business line and those wonderful customers that your business could be looking for. Again, 1 in 4 Americans have some type of disability, largest group out there. Aside from that talent value that we just discussed, when you tap into this again untapped talent pool, you're going to increase your business and really launch your company into a whole new market of customers, and it's a large market. If we take a look at the numbers, 20 million families out of 70 million families out there have at least one family member with a disability. So you're not only gaining the people with disabilities as customers, you're getting a lot of family members as well, and a lot of new potential customers. People with disabilities also account for a spending power worth over $645 billion. 87% of the public rather do business with companies that hire people with disabilities. Not sure what the other 13% prefer, maybe neutral. But as we say, people with disabilities and family members of people with disabilities are definitely fiercely loyal with their purchasing dollars, and they definitely select products and services over the competitor. You can ask my wife how much we support Pepsi and the Pepsi brand. We've been working with Pepsi for 8+ years now. And as a former Coke drinker, I am a Pepsi ambassador. I get Lay's chips, I get Pepsi, I get Mountain Dew, I get Gatorade over Powerade, I get Aquafina over Dasani. I go out of my way to make sure I'm supporting that brand over the competitor for sure. Again, something that is people with disabilities are definitely taking notice. So again, opportunity, getting into that market value as well. All right, so let's get into the tips now that we have that knowledge. So the first tip is to see if you are a federal contractor. Understand whether your employer is a federal contractor or possibly a subcontractor. You'd definitely be surprised at how many companies are actually federal contractors and don't realize that they are. You might know at a headquarter level as well, but you want to make sure your sites know that you are a federal contractor and you're supposed to be doing what you're doing to actually go out there and recruit and hire people with diverse backgrounds, including people with disabilities. And if you are a federal contractor, you are supposed to be able to create an affirmative action plan, an AAP, each year. This is great information to know because if you do not hire people with disabilities or you do poorly at it, you definitely risk of having an embarrassing audit from the government agency, the OFCCP, if you're not familiar with them already. As you can see, federal contractors are defined as individuals and employers who enter into a contract with the United States. Could be any department or agency, could be your local DMV, to perform a specific job, supply labor and materials, or for the sale of products and services. Good rule of thumb is if your company has over 50 employees and has any contracts with the US government, that's over $50,000, you're most likely some kind of federal contractor. And if you think about it from a business perspective, 50 grand really isn't that much money compared to millions and billions that some companies actually contract yearly. Most companies in the Fortune 500 are federal contractors. And if you don't know, if you are, you can ask a supervisor or look on your new hire paperwork or an online application. If it includes that, check yes, no, or if you wish not to prefer the disability form, then you're most likely a federal contractor. And a part of that is looking at the Section 503 of the Rehab Act. So let's just say you just realize you're a federal contractor on the previous slide, and that you should be out there, again, attracting and hiring people with disabilities. Or perhaps you're a federal contractor and did not realize you were supposed to be doing this. We would call the legal teeth behind this, what you need to be doing as a federal contractor, are really spelled out for you here in Section 503 of the Rehab Act. This section states that you need to be able to track how many people with disabilities apply and who are actually hired, along with tracking the success of those outreach efforts that you do to talent with disabilities. That is where the check yes, no, or do not wish to answer if you have a disability during that online application or the new hire paperwork really comes into play. Not only do you need that in place, but you also, as you can see there, each job group that you have should have 7% of people with disabilities in it. So what that means, let's say you run a business with let's say a warehouse team, a sales team, and then you have a management staff. The total percentage of those workers for each of those jobs group should be 7% with disabilities all across your jobs. So if you have 100 forklift operators, 7 of those 100 should be people with disabilities. More importantly, really went in there and checked the box that they have a disability for you on those forms. As we work with employers, there's a full disclosure here. Many companies aren't hitting that 7%, but when you show progress and action, that is going to get you further than pleading ignorance on the whole subject. These regulations, we like to say, are designed to give talent with disabilities really a fair chance at employment. They're not designed to scare employers into finding ways around these regulations just to be compliant. It's really, you want to make sure you're using this as a resource to go out there and really attract and hire, more importantly, promote people with disabilities. Keith?
Thank you, Kevin. So that brings us to tip number 2, change your view of disability. So we ran through some of those initial stats during the definition of the disability, but the information on your screen is incredibly important in shifting the narrative for disability employment. We already told you that most people just immediately think of a person in a wheelchair as their only concept of what a disability is. Well, what if we told you that only 8% of all the disabilities out there actually involve wheelchairs? So if nearly everyone is defining disability as a person in a wheelchair, we're leaving out 92% of people with disabilities. So we want to broaden your view and understanding. To stick with the percentages theme, just to reiterate, 70% of all disabilities are hidden. Mental illnesses, diabetes, cancer survivor, bipolar disorder are all disabilities and are hidden ones at that. And just because you may not have a disability now, it doesn't mean that you can't acquire one in the future. I'm sad to say, with everything going on in the world and with COVID, there are going to be a lot of lingering effects and potential acquired disabilities due to the pandemic. Statistically speaking, also another morbid stat here is, you're more likely to acquire a disability by the age of 65 than you are to pass away by that age. The goal here is to just open your mind and help you and your staff get past that person in a wheelchair view of disability, which we see very prevalently in today's society. You see a couple of examples here on your screen of the range of disabilities. Shaquem Griffin played in the NFL, has one hand, a noticeable physical disability. And Tom Hanks has type 2 diabetes, which is a hidden disability, and which I'm also guessing you may not have known. That takes us to our third tip today, which is accommodations. And now when we talk to businesses interested in hiring people with disabilities, accommodation is the number one fear. Businesses are terrified of that word. Maybe we just made you shudder when we said it. To be successful with disability hiring, we need you to understand that disability does not equal accommodation. So not every person you hire with a disability will need an accommodation. And it's actually quite the contrary. People with disabilities needing accommodations are actually on par with those without, statistically speaking. So disability equals accommodation, that thought process is what prevents a lot of good companies from moving forward. They worry that if they focus on hiring people with disabilities, they would need to have hundreds or thousands of accommodations, like right off the bat. The floodgates would open up. And so we encourage you to break that mentality. We're also not talking charity employment here. Certainly there's a place for that, right? But that is not our focus here. Maybe you've heard of what charity employment is. That's where a company gave a person with a disability a small part of someone else's job. What we're actually talking about is competitive employment. So the person that you hire is still going to have to meet all of the qualifications and perform all of the essential functions for the job. But as we like to say, it just may so happen that they have a disability. So besides getting past that disturbing stereotype of every person with a disability needing an accommodation, you actually need to know where that accommodation policy is located in your company. If you're like many employees and HR managers, you may not know. We talk to a lot of them. Also, is there a phone number or an email address on your accommodation policy, or maybe mentioned online during that application process? Just a helpful tip, check them and make sure that they actually work or lead somewhere, because many times they do not. They end up going to kind of an email that hasn't been checked for the last 5 years, or maybe what we've seen with some is they actually go to an old-fashioned answering machine. So you want to check those. Also a bit of common sense, but you also have to be discreet. So if you receive a formal accommodation request, you've got people's self-esteem and occasionally, potentially careers can be in your hands. And so it's important that you respect that and keep that information to only the people in your company's policy that need to know if the request is made. It is also a great idea to make every employee aware of how to make a request, an accommodation request, and where to find that information. Trust me, it will help you. It will help centralize everything and help standardize it. Most employees have absolutely no clue how to make an accommodation request or even where to go to put one in. And so they may not say anything at all, and they may need just a very small zero-cost accommodation, and they would have stayed in that job, but maybe they left, and that leads you to unnecessary turnover. So many times the employee is also going to have an idea of what's going to help them accommodation-wise as they begin this process, and you're just going to collaborate to get it done. Then you put that in place and document and follow up. So we've got on your screen a definition of what a reasonable accommodation is. We want you to keep in mind that a reasonable accommodation isn't designed to give a person with a disability an advantage over others. It's designed to give them an equal opportunity as those without. So very, very common misunderstanding, and maybe you've seen that in the workplace as well. Also, 80% of all accommodations are under $500, and 50% of all accommodations are $0. So I'm guessing that both of those figures are a lot less than what it costs to turn over a potentially great employee, which what we've seen with some companies could be upwards of $10,000. That brings us to self-identifications, tip number 4. So by increasing self-identifications, we mean that more people are checking that box that says they are a person with a disability, either as an applicant or as an employee. And those are the numbers that the government will want to see. And so how can we increase those? You can influence those numbers in a few different ways. First off, is your workplace accepting of diversity and people with disabilities? If the answer is a hard no, then that's going to be clearly one reason why your numbers are low. Word spreads really, really quickly if your culture isn't the best. Are there people with disabilities on your website? People sharing their stories, testimonials. Are you active in the disability community? And by active, I don't mean that you just give money to disability organizations for charity purposes. That is great, and we certainly commend you for that. But we mean actually making partnership connections for employment and recruiting. So we're talking attending open houses, virtual job fairs, helping with resume reviews, connecting regularly with your contacts. And those partnerships are going to help you tremendously. Now, I'm talking about organizations like Goodwill, Wounded Warriors, vocational rehabilitation, your local workforce. Those are all great options to make connections with. Also, there's, is there an online company portal or intranet where your existing employees can update their status? Many companies have these days. So if you do have that, with some education and some leadership buy-in, you can absolutely boost those numbers with your internal employees with self-identification campaigns. But really what it boils down to is ultimately people have to be comfortable with you and your culture if you want them to self-ID as both an applicant and also an employee. So any steps that you can take that move you closer to that is going to increase both of those numbers for you. And it's also important to touch on why people don't self-disclose. Job seekers and employees don't disclose their disability or don't check yes on that form for really what we say are three different reasons. First, frankly, they're afraid that you're going to use that against them in the hiring process or single them out. Second, if they have diabetes or they're a cancer survivor, or maybe ADD or ADHD, they may not even know that their condition fits the definition of a person with a disability. So they certainly aren't going to check that box, which is why companies need disability education on an ongoing basis. And the third we mentioned is company culture. So if you have a bad or toxic culture, it's usually going to equal low self-identifications and also a poor disability community reputation or an unknown one could also lead to low self-identifications as well. Kevin?
All right, we talked about diversity earlier, and it's known that diverse hiring definitely increases productivity, creativity, and also is going to affect your employer's internal and external reputation. So when you're hiring people with disabilities, you're definitely adding people that bring unique viewpoints and into this decision-making process when you have those tough decisions to make. We've heard a lot of people with disabilities who have had some horror stories where they've been battle tested in life. They've been told that they're stupid and couldn't do this job. Real stories we hear. They'll never amount to anything, or they're treated like a charity case. Again, all these stories we've heard from the mouth of talented people with disabilities working for our trusted clients. And if you look around the board here, we got Michael Jordan. Everyone knows Michael Jordan's laser focus, right? As a basketball player, he actually has ADHD, and ADHD can actually help hyper focus on something that they're passionate about. Very successful for Michael Jordan. We got Jamie Brewer, actor. She has Down syndrome and has been in many movies and TV roles, reaching the highest levels of her profession. We got who's that FDR there? Individual who had polio, right? And not only did he hold the highest office in the land, but he also helped the creation of March of Dimes, which led directly to the cure of polio, which changed the future of millions of people's lives. And lastly, my favorite there is Dan Aykroyd of Ghostbusters and Blue Brothers fame. He was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and is on the spectrum. And he really talked about how having Asperger's really helped him make both of those movies. He got obsessed with ghost stories and detective work, and from there he was able to create those wonderful movies that we love to this day. So again, adding unique personalities to your team, not just diversity, but with disabilities as well. So those are your 5 tips there. Your role as a federal contractor. Make sure you want to change your disability viewpoint of the different types of disabilities out there and the talent that comes along with that. Disabilities does not equal accommodations. Looking at the 2,000 plus people we've hired with Pepsi, Only a handful of those individuals need an accommodation to be successful on that job. You want to increase your self-identifications, why people aren't, and be more of an employer choice of people with disabilities. And people with disabilities make your business better through diversity. So we also have a 10 reasons for hiring people with disabilities coming up on March 3rd at 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is SHRM certified. You could visit our website to register for that event. And that brings us, I know we're a little bit over time, but that brings us to the Q&A part of this presentation. So feel free to type in any question you might have in the Q&A portion of that menu bar there, and we'll be happy to answer it. Looks like we have one already. While I read that, if anyone has a question, please type it in. Yes, there's a question revolving around cancer survivor may or may not fall under the definition. So cancer survivor does fit on the definition of when it comes to selecting whether you have a disability or not, or have in the past. If I go back to that definition, you'll see. There you go. So cancer or cancer survivor falls under the category of a disability for a couple of reasons here. One, it limits one or more major life activities. So that checks the box there. And then people are kind of curious why a cancer survivor would be included in that, because it did limit one or more major life activities at some point. And also having a disability is also a record or a history of such impairment. So that's really why it fits the definition of disability. If you look on the form given by the OFCCP, usually found on applications as well, you'll see that I'm not sure if cancer or cancer survivor is actually included in the examples they give, but it definitely talks about a history or record of such impairment. We will not share the slides because things change. We want to make sure we have the most accurate information out there, but this will be available on our website, and I believe we'll email it out to you as well. So we'll be able to review this slide at any time. I'll put up the slide with the next webinar coming up. Thank you, Brian. I have another question. What are some of the best ways to connect with or advertise jobs to people with disabilities? Keith, you want to answer that one?
Sure. Great question. That's actually what we do. So we appreciate the question. If you're an employee interested in that, we have a career center where we can post all your jobs, and we do outreach to community organizations that serve job seekers with disabilities. But, part of it outside of that is just making connections with organizations. And I know that's really hard given the environment we're in with everything being virtual and digital, but LinkedIn have great resources and other connections where you can connect with maybe a vocational rehabilitation, business representatives. They're in every state and almost every city, and those are great people to know, especially to kind of start building relationships with businesses and community organizations as well. So we're happy to help you, but there's also some resources out there too.
Good one, Keith. Yes, we're not here to sell you on anything, but that definitely is what we do. We help with that outreach, not just checking the box for compliance, but going a step better and really finding you some great talent for your business needs. But as Keith said, it's a challenging time right now because you can't go to events, you can't have people on site typically. But I tell you, there are talent partners out there that are dying for employers to reach out for them right now because they're all virtual too. They're helping job seekers find jobs in this difficult environment. So although it's an interesting time, I think it's really a good time to start developing some of those relationships, especially with the technology and Zoom and Teams and everything that we have at our hands. I think we have one more question. All right, this is a good one. What have you found is the best way to educate employees on what is included in the definition? I feel like many people don't self-identify as having a disability. such as diabetes, ADHD, because they don't see it as one. That is a good one. So, Keith, I'll answer a little bit. I know you're doing some work with one of our clients right now on their self-identification campaign. But yes, it's a lot of education in letting employees know that different kind of disabilities out there. Again, there's still a stigma about having a disability or representing yourself as a person with a disability. So the individual themselves still have a little bit of stigma, and they need the knowledge to understand that diabetes and asthma, as Keith's story told you, he didn't realize it was a disability, he just thought it was a medical condition, but it does fall under that disability definition, and he should be checking the box as he goes to hopefully not a new employer soon, Keith. So yeah, there's a lot of education around that. Just kind of continue the lunch and learns, anything you can do to get the word out that there are different types of disabilities included in the definition. And especially, and Keith mentioned this a little bit, but checking that box is not something a lot of people are comfortable with doing because they feel like it's going to be used against them, which is another myth on the job seeker side. So again, lots of education, lunch and learns, getting the word out there, videos, anything you can do internally to really support your message of different types of disabilities out there. Keith, anything to mention on the current work you're doing?
Yeah, just to add on what you were saying there, is it's important to build it into what you do from a training perspective. With turnover and everything else going on, I'll use my own situation as an example. I'm a person with severe asthma. I could have been checking the box for probably the first 12 years of my employment life with various federal contractors, but the thought never crossed my mind because that, my situation wasn't listed on that, sheet of paper, right? So it wasn't until, I ironically started working for Disability Solutions about 6 years ago that, I realized that, my condition, or, I viewed it as my journey in life. Everybody's got their things, right? I didn't know that it fit the definition of a disability. And so there's a lot of people like me that currently work for you who would, very simply check the box for you with some of this basic education. And that's one of the ways that you can also become a more inclusive environment is providing that education, and then also reaching out to community organizations so that you can build that reputation externally as well.
Thanks, Keith. And going back to the resources of find people with disabilities looking for jobs, one of our attendees mentioned Ticket to Work program. So Ticket to Work program is a wonderful program through Social Security that helps individuals get back to work through benefits. So definitely a Ticket to Work program. They're called employment networks, or ENs for short. So those are around all across the country. Our parent company is an EN as well. Thank you for that. All right, I don't see any more questions. Again, we'll hang out here for about a minute or two if you want to type in your question, and we'll answer it. If not, we appreciate you coming to the presentation together, helping change minds and change lives with us. You can reach us at dsinfo@disabilitytalent.org. Our website's disabilitytalent.org. If you're interested in seeing our career center, that's jobs.disabilitytalent.org as well. Like I said, we'll hang out here for another minute if there's more questions. If not, again, we appreciate you joining us today, and we look forward to working with you. All right. Thanks for joining all. Bye-bye.